So as you can see here with the number 8, the first thing that I do is just fill the void with wax. Like you have 3 margins that are cut into the plastic that hold the wax. Without touching a Hallenbach, all I've done is stack wax into this cutout area, and I pretty much already have, you know, the contour that I want. It's fairly smooth, and I have all of these margins closed off in about 60 seconds. So when you start, just get all of that wax in there, get it around your margins, and have the wax flowing where you want it to flow before you start thinking about any detail. So this isn't something that I always do, but it's, you know, one technique that's usable is I'll flow wax all the way across the incisal edge, so that way I know that the wax is exactly where I want it to be as far as height goes. And then using the non-wax tooth, so this plastic tooth, use that as your guide and start removing wax off of the tooth that's not supposed to have wax. And the tip of this Hallenbach makes an almost perfect embrasure. So if you gently start carving that out, it'll get you very close to where you need to be as kind of a framework for this incisal edge. Until you can get the tooth to come out. Then you can add for your proximal contact, which I showed a lot of you this last week. But if you just layer wax in the contact area, it doesn't need to be perfect, just get wax in there. Wait for it to get to that kind of a matte look so it doesn't have that high gloss, about right there, and then stuff it in. And then once it's cooled off and you pull it out, you can see exactly where your contact is. So now you can just work around that contact.
Group 2 to tooth ID, please. Group 2.
And one thing you'll notice as Dr. Kelly's working, if you look at, again, we kind of pointed this out last week, but finger rest is going to be really important. You can see anytime he's using his waxing tip or his Hollenbeck, he's got his ring finger resting on the facial or incisal surface in order to give him the most control possible. When I see wax-ups that look really kind of jagged or look really notched, it looks like the student doesn't have great control of the instrumentation. It's usually due to a lack of a finger rest. Once you develop that finger rest and that modified pen grip to kind of hold on to it, you will have much more control and kind of getting that very precise removal of wax that will be allowing you to. And the 3D cameras are running, so if anyone wants to throw on their glasses and go take a look at the 3D image, I would show that a little bit clearer as well. Coming back from the venue, just remember masks, gloves, and eye protection while you're waxing.
a question. So you said, I was like following along with some of the stuff you said, but I missed the part about, just the incisal edge, like the distal incisal edge, and how exactly to, you know, like straighten that out and get it in line.
Alright, so what do you mean exactly?
So, I just, like, I guess I'm struggling with getting the distal incisal edge, like, in the exact, like, way that it should look.
So, I mean, I think that it's pretty good. So it looks like it's long and loopy
Mhm.
because your cusp is maybe too long.
Okay.
Right, so where my cusp is just barely
Yeah.
longer than the lateral,
It's a little
yours
long.
is like 3 millimeters
Okay.
longer. So if you were to reduce this cusp a little bit, it would make your distal incisal not so like long and loopy.
Okay, and should I try to like straighten it out a little bit from there rather than having it curve down and then around?
I don't think it'll curve as much once you shorten
Okay.
this cusp. Right, so once this cusp goes up to like here, say,
Mhm.
this whole incisal edge has to follow.
Okay.
So the incisal edge will actually end up going like that
Okay.
rather than like that.
That makes sense. Okay, and then for shortening the cusp, would I just sort of like scrape along each side of it?
No, so
or
I would
along
literally,
the bottom?
I would literally just get rid of it
And
gently
then,
until it gets to the level you want.
and then make the new cusp from there, sort of?
Yeah, so
Okay.
once you get this down, it's gonna flatten it out, right?
Yeah.
So then you'll remove some distal
Okay.
and you'll remove
Okay.
some mesial to get
Okay.
the cusp to pop.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So, Annette's gonna start handing out a interproximal carver. It's a little bit different than the one you'll have with E2. They discontinued the local interproximal carver, so we don't have that actual product anymore. This is more of a, interproximal carver slash knife. You're only gonna use it for your class 3s, maybe occasionally. You'll use it a lot more next semester when you're doing either next year. When you're doing the class 2 amalgams, then you'll have the interproximal carver in your B2 kit. So that's gonna be walking around giving one to each of you, so just make sure, if you're not with Dr. Tetsuo, you're at your station to receive that.
Alright, so this is a part that I feel like a lot of people struggle with, so I'm just gonna walk through it. So developmental groove, this is just my technique. May not be right, may not be wrong. If you have something that works better, by all means. But this is what works for me. So I go to the adjacent tooth, which in this instance, we're lucky because it's literally right next to, or the contralateral tooth rather, which in this case, we're lucky because it's literally right next door. I hold my Hallenbach in the developmental groove of this tooth, of number 9. I can gauge my angle, and I can gauge how far in that developmental groove is. Another good thing is that if you've done your wax up pretty accurately, you already have your line angle in. You can see my line angle here, right? It follows the line angle of 9. So when I set my Hallenbach in here, I know that I'm distal to the line angle and mesial to this middle lobe. So I gauge my angle, I gauge my distance from the incisal edge, and I just mirror that image over. So I'm holding it here, and I'm using 9 to gauge where my developmental groove is going to be. I hold the large Hallenbach all the way up and down the tooth, and I just gently go back and forth in that angulation that I got from the adjacent tooth. And I'm just gently pulling back and forth, removing wax. I'm not digging in, I'm not cutting a line. I'm just gently removing wax in fairly wide strokes. And then already from the facial, you can see that there's a dip in that wax where that groove is. I hold it this way, I can see it as well. So right now it looks kind of rough. So all I do from this point is I go in with this polishing rag and I gently start to pull away on the sides to blend it in. Push away. And then I go and kind of around. You don't want to do it over polish or else you're going to get rid of all the work that you just did and then you have to add wax. But when it's done, you have a developmental groove and you have a line angle. And if I hold it like this, you can't see it, which is what you want out of a developmental groove. You only want to be able to see it in certain light, right? So as I'm turning it, I can see it. As I'm moving it, I can see it, but straight on, well, you can see a really good straight on in here. But if you're looking at it clinically, you don't see it as much. So that's how I do it. And I'm more than welcome, or more than happy to show you guys that multiple times. And one other thing to point out, I don't have a clean margin here from plastic to wax, right? So all we want to do is use our wax as the plastic as a guide and continue to remove a little bit of wax until that cleans up a little bit.
Do you want to make like this one? A lot of them are taking this out and like trying to get the wax from in here as opposed to using it this way. Just show them that.
So if you're looking at your wax block, this is going to help you a lot if you're not doing it right. This is your wax with the lid on. All you need to do is pop the clear lid off, set the plastic base down, and there's your wax on top. Don't try to take this gray base off. The gray base, I just broke. The gray base stays on, and that's what your block sits on. Like this. And then dip from the top. Then when you're done, the plastic lid goes back on top and it's closed.
Thank you.
I just flipped around like 10 people, so.
Another thing that you're going to notice with mine, you definitely want to have a flat, uniform incisal edge. I don't like flat, uniform incisal edges when I do wax ups because nobody's teeth look like that. So I always try to have some imperfections in my incisal edge. You should not do that for your practical. Just make sure it's a nice, uniform, flat incisal edge. And one other thing to remember with this polishing rag is if you put any force on it, you're going to take off wax. So when I'm done and I don't want to take off any more wax, I have like no pressure. And I'm just going in little circles. And that will get out all of the little scratches and polish it up nicely. And then you can see the developmental groove a little bit better now that it's polished.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. This was a trial. I could see if I could record simultaneously.
Oh, did it die?
No, it just like timed out.
My computer timed out, so
Maybe it's still recording.
yeah, it's still recording.
Oh, we can turn it off. It's done.